Hello, good morning, and good afternoon, my aspiring chef friends. Welcome to July's episode of Fresh for Kids. Although I'll be honest with you, this one is not so much fresh forward, but it is very delicious. It is super, super fun to make, and it's very easy. I made these at home the other night, and my daughter, through a mouthful of them, said, "Why have we never had these before?" and promised me we will have them again. So I feel like that's a pretty good testament to how delicious this recipe is. We are going to make mac and cheese stuffed breadsticks. Just sounds amazing, doesn't it? So let's start off with, of course, first what we need to make this delicious recipe. What you're going to use is one package of frozen mac and cheese. I've had this sitting out for about an hour now because we want it to be thawed out just enough to be able to cut it. Also, you're going to need pizza dough. Now, when I made these at home, I definitely used the Pillsbury in a can pizza crust, which they were out of at the grocery store. And what do you do when the grocery store is out of what you need? Well, you got to find a substitution. So my substitution is I just bought the Publix brand pre-rolled pizza dough to use. So we've got that. We're going to need about a stick of butter to melt down. And if you don't do butter, totally get it. You could also use olive oil or whatever kind of cooking oil you prefer. But olive oil definitely is very flavorful and lends excellently to this recipe. It's what I used at home. And in our butter mixture, we're going to use some Parmesan cheese, parsley, garlic powder, onion powder, and some pepper. And a little bit of seasoning salt, just so we have a little bit of salt in there and a little bit of flavor. Because the only downside to this recipe is you can't pre-season your mac and cheese. You just have to kind of go with whatever brand you bought. And if you didn't buy Stouffer's, it really doesn't matter as long as it is frozen. So in addition to our food ingredients, of course, we will need our cutting board and our handy dandy knife. So definitely make sure your grown-up is with you or helps you out with that part of it. And then we have a basting brush or a pastry brush, so we can brush this delicious seasoned butter on top of it once we have these all rolled up. And of course we'll need our cookie sheet for baking and some spray to put down before we lay these on our sheet. And my oven over here is preheating to 400 degrees. So now that we've got all of our ingredients and all of our tools ready to go, we'll be back in just a moment so I can show you how to get started. So grab all your things and get ready to make something super delicious. All right, we are ready to get started. So like I mentioned, I've had this sitting out at room temperature for about an hour because it's almost impossible to cut safely if you try to chop this into slices as soon as you've taken it out of the freezer. So you want to give it a little time to soften up, but not too much because otherwise you're going to have a big cheesy mess on your cutting board. So you'll know that it's ready to go if you pull on the sides and it kind of comes apart from the plastic. So we're just going to flip that over, kind of push down a little bit on the bottom, and voila! We have a slab of macaroni and cheese. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to slice this into 8 sticks. And the easiest way for me to do that is to chop it in half. And halves of the halves. And then half those quarters. Math and cooking go hand in hand, don't they? So each of these I'm going to cut in half. And there we go. We have our 8 sticks that we're going to wrap this pizza dough around. Now, at this point in the recipe, you could, of course, add a little bit of seasoning to your macaroni and cheese if you wanted to. At home, I definitely did. I added a little bit of Cajun seasoning to give it a little bit of pop. But you don't have to do that. The mac and cheese on its own is definitely very delicious. So now that we have this part done, I'll be back in just a minute to show you what you're going to do with this pizza dough. Be right back. All right, now that we have sliced up our mac and cheese into 8 even pieces, we need to do the same exact thing with our pizza dough. Now, if you get the can of pizza dough, it's already going to be in a nice rectangular shape that you will be able to start with right away. The Publix brand pizza dough was rolled out into a circle, so I had to kind of stretch it out a little bit and flatten it and kind of pull it into that rectangle shape that we are looking for. So we can also cut this into 8 equal strips. So we are going to do the same thing. We'll start right in the middle. And of course, if you've got a pizza roller, you could definitely use that for this. So half, half, and then half everything one more time. And through the magic of math, we now have 8 equal pieces. And of course, you want to make sure you wash your hands really well before you do this because you're going to be touching all of this dough. If you're wearing any rings, I suggest you take those off, as Guy Fieri likes to say, de-bling for the process. So what we're going to do, we're going to take one of our strips and just stretch it out just a little bit so we have plenty to work with. And then we're going to take our mac and cheese strip. I'm going to start at one end, and we're just going to wrap this around. And oh, that's so perfect. I was going to say if you have a little bit of extra, you could trim off the ends, but this looks great. So now that we've got that wrapped up like a little mac and cheese cocoon, we're going to put it on our pre-greased baking sheet. So I'm going to repeat this process with each of these sticks. And of course, as you go along, it gets a little bit easier because you kind of create a little bit of a technique. Here we go. I want to make sure we have enough at the ends to cover those up. And just kind of work with it with your fingers to kind of smush it around. And it's totally fine to leave it open at the ends. Wrap those around. So I'm going to finish up with the other 6 of these, and then we'll be back and I'll show you how we're going to add some super delicious seasoning flavor to the top of these. Be back in a moment. Hello, and we are back and we are ready to season these beautiful mac and cheese breadsticks. And it's totally fine if they don't all look the same. That's kind of the fun part of making something like this, that they can look however you want them to look, but they do look pretty good and evenly sized. So we've got our melted butter. Just popped that in the microwave to melt that down. So I'm going to put in some Parmesan cheese, and all of the amounts of everything I'm adding in here is really just however you like it to taste. And if I'm adding something that you don't particularly like, then you absolutely do not have to put that in yours. So Parmesan cheese, I'm going to put a little bit of onion powder in there, which is one of my all-time favorite seasonings to use. Adds a little bit of flavor without having to chop up onions. And same with garlic powder. I use quite a bit of both of those in my house. I really like garlic. We'll put a little bit more in. I buy them in bulk. That way I can just refill my little containers. So we're going to add just a little bit of seasoning salt just to have a little bit of salt on there. And seasoning salt has a few other things in it also. A little bit of pepper, a little black pepper just for a kick. And parsley. Parsley is kind of magical. It makes everything look so pretty and very professional, especially with baked items. And it adds, you know, a little bit of green color so you feel like you're having a little bit of vegetables and something healthy, right? So we are going to mix this up really well. And you want to keep mixing it as you are brushing the butter or oil, whatever you use, on top, because the heavier things are going to sink down to the bottom. So we want to just keep stirring it as we go and just brush that right on the top of your breadsticks and get them fully coated. Yeah, this is kind of a genius way to add a little bit of seasoning to it since we can't add it in the mac and cheese process. But I will tell you, as we were eating these at home, we kind of decided we were going to make our own mac and cheese, put it into a container, and freeze it. That way we could use our own pre-seasoned mac and cheese. So that is definitely an option, especially if you've got a really great mac and cheese recipe that you like to use. Either way is just fine. This is just super duper easy. Really only need to buy a couple of things from the store and you are on your way to making this delicious little snack. They can be, of course, an hors d'oeuvre, which is just a fancy way of saying something that you eat before your big meal to get your appetite going. Or they could be a snack, or maybe a side dish, which is how we made it the other night. All right. Got a little bit of extra, so we'll just go ahead and coat that on. Some of the Parmesan cheese is all at the bottom, so I want to make sure they all get that little bit of extra cheese. Because of course, mac and cheese is traditionally cheddar, which tastes very different from Parmesan. Parmesan is probably one of my very favorite cheeses, and it just adds a different flavor profile than cheddar. So now that we have got these coated in our butter and seasoning, or olive oil, whichever you prefer, we are going to put these into our oven, which is preheated to 400 degrees, and we're going to let those bake for about 18 to 20 minutes. I checked mine at 18. They weren't quite brown enough, so I let them sit for just another 2 minutes and they were perfect. But every oven is just slightly different from the next, so you'll just want to check them at about 18 minutes just to see how they're doing, to see if they might need a couple minutes more or they might be just perfect. So we're going to put these in and I'll see you back in about 20 minutes. Well, hello and welcome back, and look at these gorgeous breadsticks. I did indeed leave them in for an extra 2 minutes after I set my timer for 18. So after 20 minutes, they are perfectly brown. They look so good. And man, I am telling you, this library smells so delicious right now. I bet everybody out there is wondering what the heck is going on in that kitchen, because it smells great. So I'm gonna let these cool off for about 5 minutes or so. I would definitely advise any baked goods that you make, even if you've greased your cookie sheet you're baking on, always wait about 5 minutes before trying to use a spatula to take them off. It will allow the heat to come down just enough that it will kind of unstick itself from the pan. If you try to do it too early and they're still too warm and adhered too much to the pan, you are going to lose a little bit of the bottom of whatever it is that you're baking. So that is excellent kitchen advice for you there. So I hope that you love these as much as my family did when we made them at home. And I'm pretty sure everybody here at the library is going to be excited to have one of these for their lunch today. And whatever kind of macaroni and cheese you use, whatever kind of pizza dough you use, they will be super delicious. But if you add any cool ingredients to them, I would love to hear all about it and see how they turned out. Enjoy your mac and cheese breadsticks. And by the way, today is National Mac and Cheese Day, which is why I totally picked this super cool and easy recipe for you guys. Enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your July, and we will see you next month on Fresh for Kids. Bye.